I figured I'd just talk about this depopulation narrative, population collapse narrative, which I've seen people such as obviously Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson talk about. Um, Now, I think that the way that they're framing it, which is like Elon Musk, for example, I appreciate the irony. I've got literally, I don't know if you know, but this is a Grimes. I love her music. I liked her before she got with Elon Musk. Anyway, it's just like, why is she right there and I'm talking about her baby daddy? Sorry. Anyway, the point is, um, he's said before about like the reason why he has 10 and counting, potentially 11, in my opinion, kids, um, is because he's doing his part to for the depopulation. Like that's the biggest threat threatening society, humanity, and Jordan Peterson has said similarly, but um, Peterson has sort of said, I just watched a clip of one interview with him where he answered a question about it, and he was saying that he believes, the birth rate is declining all over the world, apart from a lot of African countries, which is true, but he says that the reason he believes that it's happening is because of like leftist agenda and the fact that people are so self-hating because of like leftism and stuff, and like I wrote down what he said or something, like a snippet, because I knew that I was going to do this video at some point. He wrote down, he said that, here we are, we should, something that we should just roll up and die. We all think that we should just roll up and die, and we should shame women into not having children, and we should shame men so that they never manifest any planet-destroying ambition, and it's truly appalling. It goes all the way down to the bottom of things. That's what's tearing our culture apart, this dispute about the nature of existence at the most fundamental level, and the universities have come out on the wrong side. That's what he said on the Chris Williamson podcast. And anyway, Peter Zeihan, who's a political strategist, has also talked about this as well. He's obviously alluded to the consequences, but he's also just given a lot of information about the state of it and like the actual stats and what's happening. It's obvious that in China is an anomaly because they had the one-child policy for probably like 30 years or something, then two-child policy, and then I think it's now in 3 children. Yeah, but also in China it was a really big issue because of female infanticide during the one-child policy. There's a lot more men than women, which is yet another issue. Also, just the lockdowns that are happening, the constant lockdowns, and the culture, which isn't really cohesive for having a family necessarily, from what this guy Peter Zeihan says, and apparently, according to him, China overestimated the population by like 100 million people. That doesn't sound like a mistake to me. That sounds like quite deliberate. Anyway, so China is a specific case though, that's not everywhere. Russia, apparently the death rate was already higher than the birth rate. That's before they invaded Ukraine. Whereas in most countries outside of Africa, the birth rate is below the replacement rate, which is obviously 2 people, so it's below 2, which means that the population will eventually, once that catches up to the demography, it will eventually decrease. The reason it hasn't yet is because people are living longer and there's just a lot of old people. The consequences of this are very interesting, and they range from, affecting trade to affecting globalisation at large and transport and the cost of services in countries in the future and social programs and things. And that is mostly because if there's more dependent people, older people, and less of a workforce to support them, that's an issue. However, I do feel like once that 100-year perhaps phase of time has passed, maybe we would be in a better state. But I mean, it's very interesting as well, because in order to support what's going to happen, obviously automation with AI, not AI, but machines, robots, as well as obviously AI and things as a tool, and immigration in order to prop up the economy is going to happen. But then there's economic effects for the nation in terms of like economic leakage. And anyway, it's beyond me, but there's a lot more to it than this. But there are lots of different effects. What I'm interested in saying, okay, so now I'll actually get to the point. What I'm interested in talking about is why the birth rate is decreasing, because Peterson frames it as though we're all self-hating. Oh my god, climate change, how dare I have a child? And Elon Musk sort of like, I suppose from what I gather, it's kind of a similar attitude, like people just should have more children. Why are people not having children? It's like, babe, honestly, like, you don't understand. It's not because people don't want to have kids, it's because people are responsible and they can't afford to have kids, and they're not willing to give, like, that they're being responsible adults, and the state of the economy isn't in a place where women particularly, but both men and women, are in a safe enough position where they can, and then when they get to one, when they finally do achieve that financial stability, guess what? They're probably infertile. This is for many reasons, and I just want to point them out, and I'm going to try and do it as quickly as possible so I don't rant on for too long. Because one of the main things that people will say, like, you learn in like geography, GCSE, like, why, like, looking at the world, right, like, why do birth rates decrease? One of the main reasons would be like, because emancipation of females, like, once you educate women out of poverty, out of an uneducated place, they have less children. Yes, that's very true, but we're talking about a difference from like poverty and the very, very, very developing world to them becoming a developed nation. So now you've eliminated ignorance about contraception, lack of access to contraception, crime and rape and things like that. Like, the really kind of things that are out of the woman's control have now been removed, and the woman has more control and safety, and therefore, and also, like, you know, in like child death is lower, so like people choose to have more children in developing countries. My point is that is not the reason why that happens all over the world. It's way more complicated than that. It's also very simple to say, oh, because we move into like the world is becoming more urbanized. I can't remember the percentage, but it's something like, let me look it up quickly. How many people world live in urban environments? 4.4 billion. So 56% of the world's population lives in cities. So that's not necessarily even semi-urban. It's like, that's cities. So like probably more like 60% or something, or 70% maybe, live, more than half the world's population lives in cities. Obviously, as Peter Zeihan puts, I've listened to him a couple times, and he always says that like when you like in rural environments, especially if you're living on a farm, like we did pre-industrialization, children are free, cheap labor. In urban environments, they're expensive pieces of furniture, because they can't, like, you don't have a farm. They're literally now just people you have to feed, dependents, and they're taking up more space. So obviously it's not going to incentivize people to have children. This is simplistic though. These aren't the reasons that I'm getting to, because this is just common sense, and that's just, no one can really argue with that. But let me see. Oh, where's it gone? What I want to draw your attention to is the fact that in 1980 in the UK, the average house price was about £23,287. Obviously, that was in their money. They also got that's not accounting for inflation. The average wage was £6,000. That's also not accounting for inflation, so that is proportional. Today, the average house price is 2,900. This is in the country, so we're not talking about just London. This is in the whole country. £294,800, and the average salary is 31,400. Also, that salary as well is taking into account high earners. That's taking into account older earners. It's not for the age range that you'd be fertile necessarily. Just put that out. But this is, so in 1980, that is like, it would take you the average house price was worth 4 years of your salary. It'll obviously take longer to save because you've got to pay for rent and living, etc. But now it's worth nearly 10 times the salary. And also the cost of living is higher. So this is adjusted for inflation. Petrol used to cost, adjusted for inflation, about 90p. A pint of beer, about £1.10. A loaf of bread, about £1.10. And a pint of milk, about 54p. That's adjusted for inflation. So in time, that would be today's money back then. It's not you can't a pint of milk. It's not 54p anymore. In that money, in 1980s money, it was 17p. But my point is, if it was today, it would be 54. But it's not. It's not. Cost of living is up, obviously, and we all know this because it's 2022 and the energy crisis, etc. So there's that. Okay, there's that. There's the fact that the amount of time it's going to take to save to purchase a house or to pay off your mortgage is much, much longer. And it's not like women weren't working in 1980. Women were working then. Probably not as many, obviously, but they were working. So that was, taking into account that women were probably 40% of the workforce at the time. I'm not sure if that's right, but I'll have to look it up. But yeah, you get my point. So let me also just say that people didn't really go to university then, and if they did, few people did, but it means that they're also people didn't have to pay for it. It was either free or very, very cheap, and so they didn't have that massive debt following university. They also didn't have the opportunity, because the people that weren't going to university, a lot of them wouldn't have had the opportunity cost of missing out on working life. So imagine if you leave school at 18 and then or even younger, 16, you're straight in the workforce, or you do an apprenticeship. Then by the time you're 21, 22, when you graduate university, typically, you've already got a lot of savings, and you can probably afford to get a mortgage, meet someone, have kids. Do you know what I mean? But that doesn't happen today, because the majority of people are brainwashed, because the university is a scam, and I will say that loud and proud, it's a scam. The majority, 99% of cases, fucking scam. Excuse me. Obviously, when people graduate now, they've got all this debt, especially in the US, but also the UK. And that opportunity cost, especially because degrees mean fuck all today, a lot of them, they're certainly not vocational, they're oversaturated, and entry-level salaries for jobs are just shit. It's just not what it was. It's not what it was in most industries, the majority of industries. So you're not set up after university. You've got a lot of debt, and you've got to figure out how to fix it. And yeah, so there's a lot of overeducated, bitter, resentful people for good reason. I'm not criticising them. I'm probably one of them, for good reason. So imagine 1980, the situation people would have been in when they were 25, having kids and everything, married, having kids. Today, student debt, just getting started in their career, not ready to buy a house. It takes them longer to save up. Is it any wonder? Is it any wonder why people are having less children? There's more to it though. It's not just this. Everything now is like, societies have always functioned as like Pareto distributions. A lot of things in biology and sociology function as Pareto. I'm so sorry. Fucking hell. A lot of things in society and biology function as Pareto distributions. The Pareto principle, or 80-20 rule, states that like 80% of outcomes are due to 20% of I'm confused. Basically, there is a theory maintaining that 80% of the output from a given situation or system is determined by 20% of the input. Effectively, it's like there'll kind of be the 20% that are better off and the 80% that aren't. Or there'll be like the 20% of things that we're paying attention to and the 80% of things that we're not. Or there'll be like the 20% of guys that see success on dating apps and the 80% that don't. Like, do you know what I mean? A lot of things are sort of determined by this statistically. But when this is happening on a local level, it's the actual numerical outcomes aren't as vast as when this is happening on a global scale. The fact that we all have access to every single person in the world, or like, we don't pay attention to the homeless person down the street, we pay attention to the war in Ukraine. We don't pay attention to our local politician, we pay attention to President Biden, for example. Or we don't pay attention to, I don't know, UK TV, we pay attention to Kim Kardashian, whatever. You get my point. Like, everything is global, so that now the attention, the wealth, and the global outlook is all focused. It's so much more focused and concentrated in specific places. Whereas before it would be kind of, there'd be smaller circles with dots in them where it was concentrated all over the world. But now it's just one big circle and one big wealthy, do you know what I mean? And like one big malignant tumour of attention. Like, it's like that. How this affects lots of things. So sorry. This affects lots of things. So when it comes to cities, right? Like the UK, this applies to like every country, but the UK has like many cities. We've got Hull, Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol. We've got Edinburgh. We've got Belfast. You know what I mean? We've got a ton. But let's be real. Most of the young people go to London. It's like a void. It's a black hole that sucks you in. Plenty don't, and there's lots of talent all over the country. Lots of entrepreneurial people, but actually not lots. There are people. I'm not diminishing that. I'm just saying the majority go to London out of all of the other cities. And not only does this cause the prices to rise, not only does this cause the commute to lengthen, not only does this cause this illusion of abundance on dating apps and stuff, and that's another issue that's not really as much of an issue as we think, I don't think. But what it does is it has many effects. So when there's this big black hole in the country, you will meet someone, like let's say I meet a guy and we're in love, and we decide, okay, we're gonna start like looking for a flat or looking for a house. I want to live in Putney, I don't care how small the place is, I just want to live in Putney because it's quite central. And he's like, no, I want space, I want nature, I want to live a bit further away even if I have to commute. Or he's like, no, I don't want to live anywhere near London. I want to go up north, maybe to Manchester. These issues are now more pertinent than before, in terms of like 1980. These issues are now way, way, way more pertinent than before, because it takes way longer to save, but it's way more extreme in London. It's way more extreme. Those stats that I was citing were about the whole country. This is London. It's crazy. And the dichotomy between like space and place and living in the city and the things you have to sacrifice is now much more vast. And the point is that there are now many more factors standing in couples' ways of being successful, of staying together. So just draw this all back to the original point. Because of that, because of house prices, etc., way more things standing in couples' ways of being successful. Because of the... fuck's sake, where is it? Because of university, because of salaries and cost of living not being proportionally increasing, and the cities being like a vacuum and stuff. Like, all of these things mean, obviously, people aren't in the position to have children earlier on. And obviously, women do have more of a clock when it comes to fertility than men. And therefore, by the time they get into that position when they're ready, they might have to have IVF or be infertile. But when it comes to fuckboys, so when it comes to the dating culture itself, because of these Pareto distributions, because of these city vacuums, the fuckboy is an economic issue, in my opinion. The fuckboy and the fuckgirl, they're economic issues. Because yes, there's all this abundance, right? And like on these dating apps, oh, there's so many people. But I think that obviously is part of the problem, because it creates a lack of trust with people. Because yes, it's easy to cheat. Like technically, I mean, it's easy to get. You know, I've had many friends that have just had sex with someone and then been ghosted, and it terrifies me. I'm like, oh my god. But like, there's lack of trust, and so it is harder to get into a relationship in these cities. Of course it happens. I do have many friends that are in relationships, but it's like not as stable as the environment isn't as stabilizing as it would be otherwise. Also, let me just make sure I haven't missed anything about that. I feel like I have. Oh yeah, this is it. One of the things that makes relationships most successful that I read a while ago is having a shared vision for the future. Having a shared vision for the future. And if you don't, or if your vision is slightly off, it wouldn't have mattered a long time ago, but now it matters more. Your visions have to be so compatible now because of the cost of things, especially if you're in somewhere like London, a big city. It's like the things that might not be, like, there's less room to compromise when like one person wants to sort of do this with their life, the other person wants to do this with their life, because everyone is already renting. Nobody has that kind of security because it's so fucking expensive. And like, so there's just such a lack of security. The actual ability to buy stuff is so hindered that when you do, it's such an extreme deal that what's the chance that you're both going to be happy with what you get, kind of thing. But yeah, you just think about that. There's clearly lots of problems going into that, that are causing couples to break up. And also, excuse me. Yeah, there's just more areas for disagreement and mismatch. And honestly, how can you blame people for not wanting to commit to relationships? Like, for me, like, I've always felt like I have commitment issues, because I've always thought, like, why would I why would I commit to someone when I can't even predict the next few years of my life? I don't know what country I'm going to live in. I don't know what part of the country, if I let's say in the UK, I'm going to live in, because London's so expensive. And but do I go back up north? Do I go back to Manchester? It's this renting thing means everybody. This is the key. Everybody is more transient, and therefore there's less commitment. No one can really have that commitment because people aren't literally settling down in location as young as they used to. And also there's less community because of this attention Pareto distribution being global. There's less community everywhere. So there's more renters. No one's paying attention to each other. I mean, try living in a big city. I'm sure you know this. Like, there's no community out there, like, in terms of a local... It's just all renters. Like, my neighbours are lovely, but, like, we don't really... It's not a well-established community. And it's like that in a lot of cities. And that's no big revelation, but it does mean that because it wasn't like that in 1980 as much, and it is like that now, it's like, how can you expect us to have to commit to a place and therefore commit to a person and then commit to having children when so much is uncertain? That rhymed, didn't it? To add to this, let's see. Oh, this is interesting. This is really interesting. Well, I mean, it just proves my point, honestly, because there's been studies, not so much studies, but literally, like, statistical surveys of, like, data. And of, like, in America, for example, they showed that some economists showed that fertility rates, the number of children that women have relative to their salary, it obviously, as the salary goes above poverty, it goes from high fertility to low fertility, and then it stays low. So it looks as though, like, oh, as women earn more, they choose to have less children. But then when it gets above a certain point, it goes up again. It goes up again because, of course, they're going to choose to have children when they're able to, when they've got the money. And I would have bet that would be much higher. Obviously, it would be way higher in the middle as well. But if those women that were earning more were more fertile at that salary, if they were younger. So these are the reasons. It's not because we're so self-hating. It's not because, like, Jordan Peterson was talking about, like, oh, we all think the world is overpopulated. It's such a, like, people are so ignorant. Like, the world isn't overpopulated. It's like, I think that overpopulation, it's all relative, really, isn't it, to, like, the amount of resources available. I'm not saying that's not an issue at all. So I think it's, two things can be true at once. But he is oversimplifying it because he's saying that, oh, everyone thinks overpopulation's an issue, they're so ignorant, and also, like, everyone thinks climate change is such an issue, like, cry me a river. He's not saying that, but, like, I agree with him that there is the general attitude that, oh, the world's overpopulated, but let's save the planet, let's not have children. But that's not the main issue. Come on. Like, people don't care that much about the planet, really. And also, like, they're not enough to not have children. And also, like, just a side point, it really annoys me because I don't see climate change as that much of a... like, I don't believe in climate change. I do, but it's a term made up by Shell or something, and so is carbon footprint. I think Shell made up the term carbon footprint. That tells you all you need to know, do you know what I mean? But as someone who's studied it to a fundamental level at university, I think what we should be focusing on instead of climate change is more so biodiversity and pollution. That's what we need to care about more than this nebulous term, climate change, which can be measured in different ways, but not that it's just such a thing. So I disagree with him that that's the reason. But I do think maybe attitude is a little part of it, but not really. this is key. This is key. So the whole lack of community thing, because we're all so global, we're all on our phones, we're all working from home, we're all paying attention to these devices, whatever, like to other, you know what I mean. We like it. They say that it takes a village to raise a child, don't they? Now I am from the northeast. I'm not going to tell you where. I'm just from a village, right? And there was a garden centre. I actually used to work in it when I was like 15, 16. And it was lovely because like a lot of the old people in the village would go to this garden centre really regularly. They'd be the same locals. Like they'll say hi. And they'd sit in the cafe and they'd just socialise, and it was really nice. That garden centre was bought and then transformed into like lots of houses. And that in itself may seem harmless, and it kind of is in itself, but not really, because where do the old people have to go? Where do the young parents have to go to meet people and socialise? There's one tiny coffee shop. I think that might have been bought now as well. There's like nowhere in the village, and especially for people that can't drive, or like if they're old, or especially if you've got children, and like there's no community anymore. There's been a lot of protests in my village about, like, over the past 5-10 years about, oh no, like save this forest, or save this patch of land, and whatever, this trail that people used to walk the dogs on, because, but, you know, save it, stop it. But no, it's been transformed into like lots of houses. There's way more people and less green space, less community places. There's less community. I think one of them also wasn't houses, it was building an Amazon warehouse, which I guess is good because it's creating jobs, but it's not exactly well-paying jobs necessarily. So anyway, this whole thing about community is so important, because in 1980, or especially before then, there was more community in the UK. I mean, before social media, before internet, before globalisation to such an extent, before people moved around as much and were so transient, and there were as many renters, before all of these things, before people went to university as much, all of these things, there was more community, and people would have been able to know their neighbours better, trust their neighbours better, know, like, have help, probably be closer to their family and things. That would have had help raising their children more likely. Whereas today, majority of people know that it's on them. It's on them, and they can't go to their neighbours, or there's no community around them unless they can ask friends, they can ask family if they're lucky enough to live near them. But other than that, they probably don't know. So that is supposedly, I guess, an attitude change towards having children, but it's not really, because let's say you have one child or two children and you would love to have a third, but you literally don't have the hands to do it. Now for basically the biggest point, maybe not the biggest point, but my final point I'm going to end on, is that women didn't, like, housewives was way more typical back then. Women more or less had a choice whether or not they wanted to work or not. Not everyone, obviously, but it was way more possible, because obviously before, like, the 1950s, 40s, women didn't really work. And while obviously, thank God we can, thank goodness for feminism giving us a chance to vote and work and everything, because I dread to think about the alternatives. But while the workforce doubled, did we mitigate the consequences of that? Now there's twice as many workers, so obviously there's twice as much supply. Is there twice as much demand? Do you know what I mean? So how has the salaries been affected? I actually don't know enough about that. I would like to read a bit about it, but have the consequences of women entering the workforce been mitigated? No, because now you used to be able to support a family on a one-person salary, and now you can't. In the majority of cases, I know many examples, many friends, many families of friends and other people I know, like, of course, both of them have to work. They don't have a choice. So the idea of having more than one or two children is incomprehensible, because how would they afford that? how would they afford that, especially when they don't have, you know, the neighbour to count on, or like the community things, you've got to pay for nannies, like all this. How would, like, women now have to work? And so not only does that mean that, you know, it's kind of harder when you have a children and stuff, like there's, I think a lot of women would prefer not to, especially in the first few years of the children being young. I know that's certainly the case with me and with most of my friends, because you want to dedicate that time to raising your children how you choose. But it also means that me, before I have children, I've always known that, like, I will most likely have to work while I have children. And so, like, for a lot of people, that will put them off having children altogether, because, you know, when you're young, before you have kids, you forecast this, you can see the future, and you're like, well, why would I want to be in that position? It's not because you're selfish, it's because you're responsible for the child. You're not going to get a pet you can't look after. You're also definitely not going to get a kid that you can't look after. So, Jordan Peterson, this is not because we hate ourselves. This is not because we're selfish. And this is not because of leftist agenda. It's because of the state of society and economies, you know, because Canada, US, UK. And if you want the birth rate to climb, more policies need to be put in place to to support women. I don't think feminism has been very helpful, and the third wave of feminism, it has been in certain ways, but not with this particular issue, because it's just a biological reality. Like, there's this kind of fallacy, this, even in like more feminist media and films and stuff, there's this idea that women are just as strong as men and stuff. It's like, it's not true. Like, it'd be great if it was true, but it's not true. There are many strengths in femininity that are just completely ignored. But as far as womanhood, like motherhood goes, like, as far as biology goes, we can pretend all we want that we have all the time in the world like men, and we can pretend all we want like these technologies like IVF like, are breeze and they're going to work, but we can't guarantee that. And so excuse me. So yeah, I think it's something that both feminists need to be looking at, for the sake of women, for the sake of children, for the sake of increasing the birth rate, if that's important to you. And because the thing is, what happens when the fertility decreases to beyond a threshold? What happens when it begins to really decrease? If we couldn't mitigate for it with immigration and stuff to support the workforce, what would happen? If it got really bad? Have you seen The Handmaid's Tale? Have you seen Children of Men? Have you read it? Like, I'm not saying it's going to get that bad, because that's more of like a dystopian viral situation, I think, but like, you know, like, it gets bad. And so why don't we actually like support people? Yeah, I just think that, like, sure, a lot of people will have the argument of like, oh, well, we need to have less children anyway, so what's the issue? Well, if Jordan Peterson and Elon Musk are telling us we need to have more children, then this is my response. And also, Elon Musk, I don't think you really care about the individual. I mean, clearly not. You only care about having enough cheap workers, probably. I mean, yes, that's cynical of me, but like, anyway, I don't mean this whole thing to be cynical. I just find it very, very interesting, and I think that it's just out of touch for like Peterson to say that it's because of a changing attitude. It's like, babe, like you're a clinical psychologist. You've seen people in dire straits. Like, surely you have a touchstone about how the average person lives. I mean, he's in Canada, but like, do you not realise the economy and the economic state? Do you not realise like university, opportunity cost, debt, delayed adolescence in a lot of ways, but not because of selfishness or anything else like that, but simply because of people are doing what they're supposed to do, we do what we're supposed to do, and that is what's causing the decline, because people have followed the rules, because people actually care about their children or their potential children, so they're not willing to have them if they're going to be harmed. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So